Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. Happy Sabbath. Thank you very much for inviting me here today to speak. Let's open with prayer. Almighty God in heaven, we thank you so much for the privilege of working in your vineyard. And we pray you'll help us to do a perfect work for you today, and that your Holy Spirit be with us even unto the end. In Jesus' name. Amen. Okay. So this is actually the last presentation for me of the Sunday Law Date Initiative. And I started out teaching that November the 5th was the date of the Sunday Law. Oh, by the way, please just shout out, interrupt and shout out any questions or comments or thoughts or anything like that. Don't wait to be asked, will you? Just unmute and call out. So I was teaching November 5th, and I thought that the main 2 points I had, the two strongest evidences that I had that November the 5th was the correct date, was that on November the 5th, it was the only date where the ordinary people were doing anything. They were voting. And is it Revelation 13 says that everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, are compelled to receive a mark on their hand or their forehead. So that's everyone, normal people. And I didn't think July 18 or December 17 or January 20, whatever it was, fitted that description, because on those dates, the ordinary people weren't doing anything. So I said, the mark of the beast test, where you could receive the mark of the beast on November the 5th. And I used to say, how do you receive the mark of the beast on July 18 or December 17? And no one could answer. So I was convinced November 5th was correct. And then in February in France, Elder Terry said, no one is being, I think, this is from memory, forgive me if I'm wrong. And if you remember different, please shout out whether you're correct. France, February, Elder Terry said, no one was forced to vote on November the 5th. Her point was that the mark of the beast is being forced upon people, just like it was in 1850, it was a law, and 1888, it would have been a law. She said, but no one was forced to vote on November 5th. And the thing is, no one was forced to do anything on July 18 either. So she said, we're going to move the mark of the beast test to the loud cry. We're going to move it forwards. And we've never done that before. Elders Jeff, Parminder, and Tess always place the mark of the beast test at the mark of the beast waymark, or at the Sunday Law waymark. So we moved it forward. So I thought, if you're going to do that, you've just knocked out my main, strongest piece of evidence. Standing here today, so let me carry on. So does all that make sense? Any thoughts or questions on that? Okay. And the second strongest point I thought I had for November 5th was only half of America was represented on November 5th. July 18. Only half of the United States was represented on July 18. It was a Republican Party convention. So it's just the Republican Party. So I used to say the ship of Acts 27, King of the North, that's the whole of America, not half of America. So on July 18, you could say half of America was shipwrecked, but Acts 27 says it's the whole of America that's shipwrecked. And so I said, however, on November 5th, the whole of America is being represented. Everyone can vote. Of course, there's caveats. Not literally everyone can vote, and not literally everyone did vote. But I thought I could explain that. And then in the same camp meeting, I think it was in February in France, Elder Terry said, actually, we're going to change the King of the North to being only half of America. And now the King of the North is just the mega movement, we could say. Only. So I thought, okay, now you've knocked out my two strongest pieces of evidence. I'm not going to fight and argue over the other three or four points that I had. So I thought, okay, I'm going to stop teaching November 5th. And I thought, if I'm not November 5th, then I must be July 18th. So I started trying to study July 18th. And then I started to try and teach it. And as I started to try and teach it, I found out there was more problems with it than I realized. And there was plenty of questions that I couldn't answer. So eventually I was forced to drop July 18. It wasn't sustainable. It wasn't defendable. I couldn't defend July 18 as the only date for the Sunday law. So someone had already introduced me. Well, actually, Curtis was already teaching a bookending model where the Sunday law is a period of time from July 18 until December 17. And I had a lot of sympathy with that model already. So I looked at it more and more, and I thought, if you use that model, everything fits. So that's what I believe today, that Curtis got it right. And I think Elder Terry does as well, back in March, at least. I think she drew it on the board and said that she can accept that bookending model as well. I think Arian does too, is that right? So I guess we're in Concord on the date now, except for Elena. I think Elena says Sunday law started in January, and we're still in the Sunday law period. Okay, so apart from other problems I have with Elena's message, Elders Tess and Parminder have both said that the Sunday law waymark is something to do with the next election cycle. They said it before the election. And of course, we are way out of the election now. So I don't understand how we could say we're still in the Sunday law waymark now. Okay, any questions? Or any thoughts or anything? Okay. Then the next thing I did, after I couldn't teach July 18 anymore, I taught another one of Elder Terry's studies, which points to the internal and external death of the King of the South. And if you remember, she took Elder Jeff's teaching that you have the triple application of prophecy, pagan Rome, papal Rome, modern Rome. And that was all just duplicated word for word. That was fine. That was Elder Jeff's study. And then she said, There's actually an internal death of the King of the South at the National Sunday Law, and an external death of the King of the South at Daniel 12:1. So I taught that half a dozen times, several times. I thought the methodology was really good, and I still do. Triple application of prophecy, internal, external, end from the beginning. If you look at 1989 and then the Sunday Law period, compare and contrast. But every time I tried to teach it, I would point out that Elder Terry says that this internal death is the death of Navalny. Navalny, or the murder of Navalny, if you prefer. And I didn't understand how the death of Putin's opponent is a defeat for Putin. If you defeat your opponent, that's surely a victory for you. But anyway, I kept teaching it, and when I would ask each audience, how is it a defeat for Putin? I got two answers. So the first answer was that actually his widow, Yulia Navalny, was take up the banner that Alexei Navalny carried and bring it forth stronger. And Navalny's message would live on, I have to say stronger, if it's a defeat for Putin, or at least with the same strength as Alexei Navalny. And that she was going to be this moving force in Russia to challenge Putin. And all of that because Putin killed Alexei Navalny. So I checked it out. Yulia Navalny. So she doesn't hold any official office, not in Russia, not in whichever country she lives in, not in the United Nations or anything. So she holds no official power. But that's okay, because you get grassroots movements, populist movements, if you have the hearts and minds of the people. So I found out what she did have, and she had Instagram and a YouTube channel, maybe some others, but they had the most subscribers. So the most amount of subscribers on, I think it was the Instagram, and it was 1 million. So I thought, okay, we're talking about her defeating Putin or challenging Putin. So inside Russia. So if, let's just pretend that all 1 million subscribers to her Instagram were inside Russia, which you know is not true, but we'll give her the benefit of the doubt. And then if you divide 1 million by the population of Russia, you get something like 0.00 whatever percent. I can't remember. But it's certainly not a moving force that could ever challenge Putin. Actually, you know, my brother married a Russian woman, and they both live in Russia. And they're quite political. They follow the news, they have their opinions, they keep up with things. So I called him and I said, do you know what Navalny's first name was? And he said, Alexei or Alex or something like that. And I said, do you know what his widow's name is? And he said, no. So I said, can you call out to Anya and ask her? And she didn't know her name either. So these are, you know, Russian people that live in Russia. They don't even know her name. And I asked a couple of the groups that I was speaking to about this, and some of them didn't even know her name either. And she's meant to be a major, you know, at the Sunday Law waymark, you know, quite a major person. So what I'm trying to say is I don't think she's very influential, or I don't think she's a moving force. Does all that make sense? Any questions? So I haven't been able to accept that it's Yulia that's now the threat to Putin. Everyone's very quiet. Am I talking to myself? Okay. Okay. Oh yeah. So then there was a different answer that some people gave me, and they said the death of Navalny was the last hope for democracy in Russia, and they said that was a defeat for Putin. And I said, but Putin doesn't want democracy. Putin wants to be an authoritarian, we say, dictator. So if he can defeat democracy, that's still a victory for him. It's not a defeat for him. So I didn't understand that at all. And actually, someone pointed out that if you use what we already know, 1989 and 1991, it was the death of the King of the South. And it was the death of the King of the South because it was a win for democracy, not a defeat. So if you're saying the death of Navalny was a defeat for democracy, then that has to mean it's a win for Putin. Okay. So I had to drop that as well in the end. I must say, I don't believe that study, sorry. The conclusion of the study was that Daniel 12:1 was the end of the Ukraine war, and you could mark it that way. So I don't believe that anymore. I could be wrong, don't forget. But for me, the only marker for Daniel 12:1 is when the east wind kills the army of Rome. That's all I can be looking out for right now. Because as I would present this, and I would say you've got an internal and an external death of the king of the south, and the external death is the end of the Ukraine war, Daniel 12:1. If people say, great, what's the internal? I say, I don't know, it never happened, nothing. Then they're going to say, how do you know this model can't be correct then? Because if this didn't happen, because I did look for any other events in 2024 that represented a defeat for Putin, even a small one, and there's just nothing I could find. I think a couple of generals criticized him or something. Maybe, wait 1 second. So if I can't tell you what that is, I can't tell you that this model is true, because I'm going to say if that never happened, then this might not happen. You know what I mean? Let me give you an example. Let's say I was teaching the third one, and I said, I know for sure that at Daniel 12:1, the east wind kills the army of Rome. And you say, how do you know for sure? And I'll say, because it first hurt the army of Rome at 9/11. I can go through that, teach it for an hour or whatever it is, show you triple application of prophecy and how it was all fulfilled to date. So I think we had a question. Can someone do me a favor, maybe read it to me? I'm not good at keeping an eye on the chat, basically.
Sure. The question is from Trufena. Hi, Aaron. According to you, who is a threat to Putin then?
It can only be Trump. Or you could say NATO. But if you mean back in 2024, internally, inside Russia, I don't think anyone's a threat to Putin. That's why I don't believe this model. Even though all the methodology is good, it just didn't happen. Because internally there is no threat, because the Wagner Group history, Putin won that one. Alex Navalny, Putin won that one. And I don't think there is anyone else. Maybe if you really dig deeply, maybe the oligarchs are unhappy with him or something like that. But I looked all that up in 2024 and there wasn't anything particular going on. So, so that means also I've gone back to saying that as Elder Tess taught, that the death of the king of the south is actually Argos, Sunday law, National Sunday Law 2024. And I've gone back to thinking what I used to say was correct about November 5th on that one subject. Because don't forget, I do believe Curtis's model that July 18 to December 17 is the Sunday law waymark, that period of time. But for the death of the king of the south, I'm going to have to say Elder Tess got it right when she said, the death of the king of the south that Sunday, they were probably just going to be losing some proxies. And Putin has basically now, or in the very near future, lost all of his Middle Eastern proxies. The war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza has decapitated Hamas. They're ineffective now. So if I start from the top, Iran, so you know what's happening with Iran already. They're already talking about regime change, but you can see the way that's going. Iran is in no way close to being as powerful or as much as a threat as it used to be considered. Syria, was it December 7 or something? First week of December, Assad flees Damascus to live in Russia in exile. So Putin is losing Iran, has lost Iran, has lost Syria. Hezbollah, finished, they're ineffective. Hamas, ineffective. Houthis were always ineffective, and there are no other Middle Eastern proxies. And Elder Tess did say, she didn't say Middle Eastern proxies, but she said proxies. So I've gone back to thinking that that was the death of the king of the south, and it's not to do with Navalny or Ukraine. Sorry, there was a question. Can someone read the chat again, please?
Sure. The next question is from William. It's so it goes, do we expect anyone internally to be a threat to Putin, Aaron? I thought the Eastern Front is about Russia in relation to other nations, either in Middle East or Africa. That model doesn't give us what is happening internally in Russia. So this last bit was a question.
Can you read it again? Sorry.
Okay. Do we expect anyone internally to be a threat to Putin, Aaron? I thought the Eastern Front is about Russia in relation to other nations, either in Middle East or Africa. Then there's a question at the end, but sorry, you got it?
Did you say there's more? There's a question at the end.
Yeah. That model doesn't give us what is happening internally. Doesn't that model give us what is happening internally in Russia?
That model, do you mean this model? Or do you mean War on the Eastern Front model?
Maybe William can come in and explain because I'm also not sure what he means.
William, are you in a position where you can speak? Oh, okay. Model here is in, this model is different to the, okay.
William, if possible, please just speak.
Reference.
It might be better to understand what you're asking because I also don't understand.
Yeah, sorry. I wasn't sure if we were allowed to speak in the midst of a class, but the question is, the model that, as far as my recollection, is that Elder Tess built in relation, okay, we have the Western Front and then we have the Eastern Front. I understand the Western Front to be the work that is happening internally in the United States of America. So when we are speaking about the United States of America, be it in the context of raffia or the Sunday law, we expect it to be activities that are happening internally within the United States. Then my correction is in reference to the Eastern Front. That is where we have Russia, and what is happening in Russia with its spheres of influence. That is what I meant by saying either in Africa or Middle East or elsewhere. So the question is now, if we are looking at the fall of Russia, which I believe should, the King of the South, which I believe should be from Peniam, and then that culminates with the Sunday Law 272, all right? Are we then expected to look at what is happening internally in Russia, or we are expected to look at what is happening in the context of the Eastern Front? I hope that is clear.
Okay. So you went straight to one of my weakest points. That's the world wars. So when we talk about Eastern Front and Western Front, the way Elder Tess applied them, at least in World War II, the Western Front lines up with Ipsus. So that's history. And I didn't ever hear her reapply it to the Sunday Law period or Daniel 12:1. And in my notes, I can't find where she puts the Eastern Front. But either way, my point is, when Elder Tess taught Eastern Front and Western Front in the World Wars, she applied them to waymarks which are already passed. One of them was 2016 Ipsos. So can I just ask, William, why would we reapply them at Sunday Law or Daniel 12:1? Or...
My recollection is that most of the thesis studies were ending at the Sunday Law, that model.
I think they all
Yes.
did. That Acts 28.
Yes. If you look at either Acts 27 or if you look at the model of how do we call it? The World War, World War I, World War II. I mean, like all her studies were building waymarks that culminated, all ended at the Sunday Law. And that is how I remember basically she already applied, like as Dennis correctly said, if you look at in the context of 1989, we have something that is happening internally in Russia. But what I can remember in the context of 2016, 2019, 2021, and the Sunday Law, she was discussing Russia in the context of the Eastern Front, and she didn't seem to be focusing on an internal work in Russia.
Right, I agree. And when we tried, I think we became a bit stuck. So I've never thought to reapply Eastern Front and Western. I see what you mean. I think, okay, I'm getting it. Sorry, I'm being slow, because when I taught this, it alludes to Eastern Front, Western Front being repeated. But because I've dropped that now, I'm going to say I don't think the Eastern Front and Western Front is repeated at Sunday Law. I could be wrong. I haven't looked into it. But as far as the US is concerned, okay, so I have already said, put it this way, I've already said publicly a few times that at Sunday Law you get civil unrest, and Daniel 12:1 you get open insurgency. So people colloquially call that civil war. It's not technically a civil war, it's open insurgency. So internally in America, there, I believe, We can see the civil unrest already. And I believe when you get to Daniel 12:1, probably some little bit after Daniel 12:1, it will turn into open insurgency. So that's what I think will be happening internally in the US. Does that make sense? Does that even answer your question?
Okay, so he responded in the chat and said that's okay.
Okay.
And I'll just like to repeat what you said at the beginning. You had sort of opened the floor that in case of any questions, it would be good for people to open their mics and say what they have to say. So if you have a question, please open the mic unless you are in a situation where it's really difficult to speak or something. Otherwise, please you go raise your hand as what Muriuki has done and ask your question. Okay, so Muriuki has a hand up already. So Muriuki.
So I was just trying to harmonize. So happy Sabbath, everyone. I was just trying to harmonize what William is trying to show based on the history of the internal and the external. And I tend to think when you come to the midnight cry and what Elder Test tries to show, which one perspective I would agree with William is that more of the fall was connected to the external because that was the main focus. The perspective of the Eastern Front is a confrontation between the king of the North and the South. That is, as William put it, Russia, the king of the South, with the other nations of the world, might be NATO, might be Europe, might be USA. So, and I think one of the models that the elder left us was that of the Third Diadochi War. So you have a catalyst to the Third Diadochi War, which is the Battle of Gabin. This is where you have Antigonus with two allies, Phaethon and Seleucus, fighting against Eumenes. And I think the defeat of Eumenes is what projects Antigonus as the master of Asia. So it's actually an external war where Antigonus and Eumenes are fighting over the control of the spheres of the north of what was Alexander's kingdom, that is Asia and Thrace and the rest. So, but when you look at this model, I think it tries to bring in the perspective of an internal and an external. Because when you even go to the application, which the Battle of Gabin is 1989, Antigonus is USA versus Eumenes, who is seen to be the king of the south. And we mark the defeat of Eumenes from the inside. So I was trying to think the defeat of USSR, it was both an external concept and an internal, if we can go to the history. Because what will happen is that the alliance between America and Vatican will try to bring in mobilization in the Soviet satellite states. And what they will do, some of them as Iran, Afghanistan, Ukraine, they will have revolutions which will overthrow and topple down their Soviet governments. And this is the operation that America will do, the Operation Cyclone, to finance those who can fight, can form a militia like the Mujahideen. Those who can not fight, they can stage protest across the streets to call for the downfall of the Soviet Union. But externally also, you see the loss of, actually we buy the model, Russia loses all, the king of the south loses all, and only retains Russia. All these satellite states are also external spheres of influence that demonstrate the global dominance of the king of the south as a superpower. So right from 1989, I tend to see the pattern we are given is an internal and external. So I would tend to think, and from the beginning, this is the first fall of the king of the south. The last fall of the king of the south, I think we need to zoom in and see we have an external fall, that is the king of the south interacting with other nations of the world. And we can also see an internal fall. And how that looks like is by going to the Russian politics as we go to the American politics. So I was maybe speaking my thoughts and saying, I think for me, we can see two. And maybe the last concept for me, I'm having trouble with. I was just out of curiosity asking how popular you need to be a subject of prophecy. Because I tend to think we would mark Michael Moore, and maybe he's not even popular in America compared to other documentarists. Maybe you can mark a certain character, opinionist, and maybe that opinionist is not so popular. But based on the role the person plays in the world of prophecy, that what qualifies that to be a major event. And I think this is a concept we had to unlearn because we have all anticipated and expected a mind-blowing event as a fulfillment of prophecy. Yet even the most important waymark for Adventist, October 22nd, not even a third of the Americans understood what happened. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Good thoughts. I agree that you should be able to compare and contrast the 1989 internal external history with today's. I agree. That's why I taught this, because I thought that was good methodology. But when I tried to teach it, I couldn't teach it because I don't know what the internal would be. So when you talk about Michael Moore, I wondered if you were saying Elder Tess said Michael Moore was a messenger to the Nephilim, maybe the Levites. But Michael Moore didn't he was not a moving force against Trump. So we have internal messengers. Wait a sec, we have things happening. You know, we talk about internal, external. So we'll talk about a change of leadership in 2014 internally and a change of leadership in 2014 externally. The US presidents. So when I say internal, external, I mean that. So Michael Moore, if he's a messenger to, we'll say, the Nephilim, that would just be the message. It doesn't mean he's a threat to Trump. Okay, but when you look at this model, you need to find out who's a threat to Putin. And so you can't just say, I don't even know if you were saying this, you didn't actually say this. But if we were to say, well, Yulia's not very popular, and Michael Moore wasn't very popular, so Yulia still fits, I think we've got things mixed up. Because Yulia has to be a threat to Putin, but Michael Moore doesn't have to be a threat to Trump. Michael Moore just has to teach the Nephilim the true stream. So if you want, Yulia can be teaching the true stream to Russians, but it's not a death to the King of the South, just like Michael Moore wasn't a death to the King of the North. Does that make sense, or did I understand you wrong?
So if I'm understanding you, you are saying that for Michael Moore, it is the prophetic role he plays that qualifies him to be a messenger. So
Yeah.
he doesn't need to be a threat to Putin. And I was trying to think, isn't it the same then? The work Navalnaya and Yulia are playing is what qualifies it to be a significant event, not necessarily being popular or being a threat to Putin. Because there are many parallels you would draw between them and other people of dared oppose Putin. That's what I was trying to harmonize.
Okay. And then something came up. Oh yeah, Eastern Front is Russia and the other nations. So there's different stories going on at the same time. So at the Sunday law, it's the death of the King of the South. And then at Daniel 12:1, we know the east wind is loosed to kill the army of Rome, but actually Revelation 7:1-4 says the four winds are loosed. Okay? So the north wind is loosed, that's the King of the North, America. And we know the east wind is loosed. The west wind, I would say it must be Western forces like NATO. And we know from Acts 27 that the south wind is Russia. So while Russia is dead here, is loosed at Daniel 12:1. And to me, that sounds like a World War III. So Acts 28 also says that the south wind blows. And Acts 28 is in this history, Daniel 12:1. So I can't remember if someone asked what would the Eastern Front look like or something like that. But there's enough prophetic evidence to say that Russia is not done blowing. The south wind is not done blowing, even though we place a death there. It's a little bit like we say, death of a dictator 2019, that was Trump. But look at him in full force right now. So I'm keeping an eye on this. I think we can see World War III brewing quite easily. And I mean literal World War, not information war. Good. Was there anything else in the chat?
I think that's it. There's now some hands raised. Two more hands in from the group. Jeff and then Snyder. So Jeff can go first.
Hi and happy Sabbath. Yeah, so I realized there's okay, you marked the death of the King of the South as 2024. So my question was, now that okay, which event are you marking as related to the death of the King of the South? Is it what happened in Syria? And if that's the case, does that mean that there's nothing related to the Ukraine war that that can be linked to the death of the King of the South? Because you marked it in 2024, and I'm assuming that's related to Syria, or you could clarify.
Okay, good question. So what am I saying is the death of the King of the South? I'm saying it was the Middle Eastern proxies that were lost, well, in that year. I know the war's been going on for a year at this point with Hamas. So I'll say again, the list, the most powerful first. Iran, so October, was it October 27th, last week of October? Do you remember Iran threw about 300 missiles at Israel, and then they did it again, but they warned Israel first, and Israel just shot them all down. And then Israel flew sorties over Iranian airspace and blew up all the surface-to-air missiles, the SA-300s in Iran. And every single Israeli jet came home unchallenged, didn't lose a jet, didn't lose a pilot, and hit all of their air defenses plus more things. So it left Iranian skies completely vulnerable. Okay, that happened last week of October. By then, the Houthis, Hamas, and Hezbollah were already rendered ineffective and still are. And then you've got Syria as well. So I'm saying it's from top to bottom. Iran, then Syria, then Hezbollah, then Hamas, then the Houthis, all rendered ineffective by this date. So I think that was the death of the King of the South. And I can send you a clip if you like, where Elder Tess says, I think the death of the King of the South at Sunday law is going to be that he loses some proxies. So I'm just going to stick with what Elder Tess said. So does that bit make sense?
Yeah, I get that. The follow-up to that was, do we have anything related to the Ukraine war?
Right. So these are my thoughts, and they're just thoughts. They could prove to be totally wrong. It's not methodology. Okay, actually, the first bit is methodology. So this bit is what Elder Tess taught, that 2021 was Panium, and it was just the information war part of the beginning of the Ukraine war, where Biden was the king of the north, by the way. Okay, so you've got a problem. We'll go into that if you want. Where Biden, the king of the north, defeated Putin, the king of the south, in an information war. And that's passed. So Panium has already been won by the king of the north, Biden. It doesn't mean the king of the north has to win the Ukraine war. Panium is past and it's already been won. Putin was already defeated. This event is now past, okay? And I'm saying it's the Middle Eastern proxies, but the Ukraine war can carry on, even though the death of the king of the south is now past, and the Ukraine war is carrying on. So this is the bit which is just my thought, could be wrong. Because Putin has already lost Panium and lost Argos, and the Ukraine war continues, and he's looking stronger than ever, I think, in Ukraine. I wouldn't be surprised if the south wind blowing here is that he wins Ukraine, or at least, you know, the Ukraine war just continues on. He may not win Ukraine because you've got to factor in the King of the North ruling the world supremely and all of that. But anyway, I can imagine the Ukraine war just carrying on. I don't. So that's Ukraine. I don't know what's going to happen if Ayatollah Khomeini is overthrown or assassinated, and there's a regime change in Iran. Putin will have zero foothold in the Middle East, and so will China. So you can see why I'm saying World War III looks like it's not impossible. So what I'm saying is the ongoing Ukraine war today isn't really much to do with Panium or Argos anymore, because their history, the King of the North won those, but the Ukraine war continues on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Was there a second hand up?
Yep. Three more hands. Snyder, any questions in the chat? Please put your hand up if you are, unless you're not able to speak at all. Please put your hand up.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Hi, Aaron.
Hi.
I think at the moment, I don't have a question, but I am currently floating, like completely floating. I've tried to like follow up since you began, and I think the first thing was to explain what you used to believe and how Elder Terry used to teach and how you've abandoned some positions. And I think I wanted some grounding from you. Maybe I'm returning the class behind, sorry, but I want some grounding from you, especially in relation to what do you believe about the Sunday law? Like in terms of, do you have a date? Because I believe majority of the movement, at least all of us, believe that we are in the Sunday law period. And currently, I don't know what you believe in, so that I can question what you believe in. I think if I question your understanding about other people's presentation, maybe it takes away from what you want to like share with us. So if you can maybe ground me on some of the main thoughts or main ideas you have in relation to your understanding of the Sunday law, so that I can know where to begin from. Because at the moment, I think I'm just floating. So if you can, maybe in a few minutes or so, hope it won't distract from the thought process that you had. Thank you.
Okay. So I believe that the Sunday law is a period of time from July 18 to December 17. The beauty of that is if you still like November the 5th, because I do. November the 5th falls in there. Which is why I can still put the test as November 5th. If you want, we can go into why I don't believe it can be at the loud cry. So that's what I believe. So if you take the image of the beast story and overlay it onto the Sunday law waymark, most people, I think everyone I've heard of, even the November 5th people and me, believe that July 18 was the image of the beast set up. So if you relate it to Daniel 3, that would mean the statue's built. Maybe it's covered for, you know, for the opening ceremony or something, but it's set up. Maybe it's not covered because it's set up and people can see it. Okay. If you take the story of Revelation 13, I think, the image of the beast, a beast is an animal. So if the animal is, if the statue is set up, it's in existence, it's built, it's finished. So this animal has been built, it's in existence, okay? But it's lifeless at that stage, July 18. So how does a lifeless beast do anything? An animal with no life in it can't pass a Sunday. So that was one of the problems I had with saying July 18 alone is the Sunday law waymark. But as soon as you breathe life into an animal, it can now stand up and start doing stuff. It can do things because it has life in it. It can do things like speak. It can do things like pass a Sunday law. It can do things like enforce a mark of a beast, the mark of the beast. Okay. So that's why I like this. I agree, I fully agree that July 18 is the first waymark of the Sunday. It's the image of the beast set up. And then on November 5th and December 17th, you have the whole of America represented. If you don't like November 5th for whatever reason, you can just choose December 17th for shipwreck of the whole of America. If you don't like December 17th, you can say it happened on November 5th when they voted in a known dictator. So that's what I believe about the Sunday law waymark.
So if I've gotten you correctly, the Sunday law for you is a period of time from July 18th to December 17th. So you don't have like a point, like the point period time thing. So for you, it's a period. And do you also mark the mark of the beast test at the Sunday law, which is also a period of time rather than the loud cry? Is the mark of the beast this period between July 18th to December 17th?
Yes.
And is that also, okay? And is that also the death of the King of the South from July 18th to December 17th? Or how do you see that? Because I think the King of the South, you mentioned, dies at the Sunday law. And is that also a period in time, or is that a point?
So the way I'm understanding the test is the logic to move it to the loud cry doesn't work. So I'm going to say what I believed in the beginning, the test was the election. If you vote for Trump, get the mark of the beast. So I'm going to put the test back at the Sunday law waymark. The death of the King of the South, all of this was 2024. I know Iran is ongoing, but you could argue Gaza's ongoing. You could actually, at the end of the 10-year Syrian civil war, they were still fighting. The civil war was over. So I'm going to say the death of the King of the South is also 2024. And it's these Russian proxies that are all dead at that point. It's now Trump that finances the Syrian government, which is a really bad idea. But anyway. And yeah, I think it's a period, not really a point. So we actually do that, I think, with every single waymark. 1989 is not just the fall of the Berlin Wall. There's many other dates in 1989. You've got 9/11 as well as 11/9 on just the story of the Berlin Wall alone. 1996, how many events and dates did Elder Tess put there? CNN established, wasn't it? Fox News established. They would be on different dates. They didn't all happen on the same day. Something to do with the World Wide Web. Al-Qaeda manifesto, ISIS leader radicalized, etc. They're all, it's a period of time. 2001, we used to just call it 9/11. Now we have to call it 2001 because 9/11 isn't the only date in there. We've also got 11/9, Mazar al-Sharif, etc. 2014, there's about 1 million dates in 2014, etc. Okay, so I think all our dates are a period of time. And by the way, they're all contained within 1 year. We don't say time of the end, 1989 and 1990, but it's spilled over. We don't say this is 2001 and 2002. So there's another reason why I don't think we can still be in the Sunday law period now, which, sorry, was another question of yours. I know Elena says that, but we can't say Sunday law is 2024, 2025, simply because we don't do that with any other waymark. It's all contained within 1 year. So I don't think we're in the Sunday law waymark anymore. I think I heard probably Elder Terry, I'm not too sure, saying that we're actually past the increase of knowledge. That was something like March or April. And I can agree with that. I haven't really looked at it, but I was sent a screenshot of Elder Terry, I think in March or April, where she agrees with Curtis's bookending model. So if you think of the increase of knowledge as concord internally, it would seem that's where the 4 speakers came into concord on Curtis's model.
So the last thought before I finish, I don't want to take too much time.
No,
I think
please.
from the model that Elder Tess created back in 2018, especially the repeating patterns of Boston, Concord, Exeter, I think we can mark 2024 as Boston. And one characteristic about Boston is that there's an unsealing of the message. And another characteristic about the formalization of the message, Exeter, is that that is where the test begins. So I don't know how you can harmonize that the test is supposed to be at the formalization of the message, yet 2024, the Sunday law, we are in Boston. I think that's thought of the repeating pattern. I don't know how you harmonize that. Thank you.
So
I'll stop there.
I'll take a picture and then so we've talked about internal, external death of the king in the south. It's fine to still have more questions, but I'll take that off. Okay. So we'll do the repeating pattern, and if you can move the test to the loud cry. So first of all, Elders Jeff, Parminder, and Tess all taught the mark of the beast test is at the mark of the beast waymark. Elder Jeff used to say, the Sunday law test, it's just like a pregnancy test. You're either getting pregnant or you're not back here. And at Sunday law, it just tells you whether you've passed this period, this testing period or not. Okay, he said, character is not developed in a crisis. Okay, so once you hit here, that's your final test, and you can't develop the character anymore to pass any test down here. And he was so adamant that the Sunday law was our final test, he incorrectly started applying close of probation texts to the Sunday law and saying it was the close of our probation because that's our final test. So I believe it is our final test at Sunday law, but Elder Parminder around 2017 had to start correcting Elder Jeff's error and say, no, Elder Parminder would say that is our final test at Sunday law, but you can't, that doesn't mean you can start moving Daniel 12:1 texts to the Sunday law. They have to stay there. My only point is that's how adamant Elder Jeff was. Elder Parminder, the latest one that I can remember, where he placed the test at the Sunday law waymark, is Germany, January 2024, I think. Oh dear, January 2020. Yeah, no, January 2023. It was 13 months before Elder Terry moved it. So Germany, January 2023, part 2, start around 1 hour 15 minutes. And he's taking 5 testimonies and saying, where is the decree is passed and the stamp is impressed, whatever that quote is. And he's going through that for a long time. He's saying, where is that stamp impressed? And he's saying here, and he writes the word seal here. That's where you're sealed because that's where you're tested. And it's actually Curtis in the audience that says, I think it's maybe down here. Parminder goes through it with him and proves that it has to be here. He says, otherwise we destroy all the texts that we've looked at in this camp meeting. That's only the latest time. Someone else has sent me other clips where he's been adamant about it before. I could forward them to you if you want. Basically, Elder Parminder used to say, a Sunday law is all done and dusted. Okay, you're tested here. And then he would say, all that happens is you pass your final test here, and then here you're just giving a message to the Nephilim. You're telling them, come out of Babylon. But that's not a test for you. All you're doing is revealing to the sealing angel that you passed your final test back here. That's the way Elder Parminder's always taught him. With Tess, I can't point you to a video where she says that, but I did one-to-one Bible studies on Zoom with Elder Tess for 2 or 3 years. And we talked about that, and I know she believed the test was at Sunday. So, as far as I can tell, and I think you just said, we're going to move the test to the loud cry because that's the formalization. And that's called the repeating pattern. Let me read something out first before I forget. Okay. So Elder Tess says that the waymarks in the repeating pattern, they all point forward. I'll explain that in a minute. Let me give you the reference. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Okay. The 9th of January 2020, Elder Tess. It's on binding off messengers. Part 4, a messenger for Nephilim. So I'll say it again. 9th of January 2020, part 4, a messenger for Nephilim. And you can find it on Binding Off Messengers YouTube channel. And if you watch the first 17 minutes, she says the following. She says it's an unsteady increase of knowledge formalization test. Because it's a repeating pattern, happens all over again in the next dispensation. Okay, so she says, here a message is just unsealed. You hardly really know anything. And then you get an increase of knowledge on that. You learn a bit more. And then once you've learned everything, it gets formalized into a series or a book or something like that. And then you're tested on it here. Okay, these are major waymarks. So this is where you sit your test. But what you're tested on is this. So at the formalization, you're going to get tested on this. This is an increase of knowledge on this waymark. This is an unsealing of a message on this way. So if we put in some labels here, let's say this is Sunday, and this is Daniel 12. So this is loud cry. So the loud cry is the formalization. When are you tested on the loud cry message, the formalization message? When are you tested? What's it about? What waymark are you tested on at loud cry? Okay, I'll tell you. Daniel 12:1. You're not tested on the Sunday one. That's the way Elder Tess always taught it. And I sent you a clip saying this looks forward, it doesn't look backwards. She states that. So let's just do some examples quickly. There's not enough information on Noah to have to put in a repeating pattern. I'm going chronologically. Noah, Alpha of ancient Israel is an incomplete line. Someone saying something? Is it the echo? Go ahead.
Thank you so much. According to the line that you have just drawn, you indicated Sunday law. Now, according to you, which date is that? According to you, because you have said that the Sunday law period lands between July 18th and December 17th. Now, which date are you putting on the Sunday law waymark?
Exactly correct. Is that what you're asking? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we can't look at the line of Noah or Alpha of ancient Israel because we don't have enough information to put the repeating pattern in there confidently. So the next one is the Omega of ancient Israel. I'm going to need a lot more space. Yeah, it's a really good time to take a break because it's a new subject. So shall I close in prayer?
Sure, if that's okay for you.
Almighty God in heaven, we thank you again for your Holy Spirit, and we pray that it will be with us even unto the end. In Jesus' name, amen.